You were the smart kid, so why do you feel so lost now? Ever wonder why so many smart kids grow up feeling stuck, disconnected, like they're somehow falling behind in life, even though they were always ahead? They were the ones praised, rewarded, told they'd go far. But somewhere along the way, that praise turned into pressure. That potential became a prison. And now, a lot of those same kids, the ones who stood out, are struggling. They can't find motivation. They feel socially behind. They have a hard time starting things, following through, or even connecting with people. And the worst part, they don't even know why. On the outside, they still look sharp, still seem capable. But on the inside, there's this constant sense of isolation, like life is happening to everyone else, and they're just watching. And there's a reason for that. Smart kids often build their entire identity around being smart. And when that happens, the very thing that made them feel special as kids becomes the thing that traps them as adults. So let's talk about why this happens, and more importantly, how to break free. Because this isn't about failure. It's about a survival strategy that stopped working. And once you understand how you got here, you can finally start to find a way out. The smart kid trap. When we're young, our identity is simple. A kid might think of himself as the one who loves Pokemon or the one who only eats chicken nuggets. It's one-dimensional, but that's normal. That's how identity starts. It's based on interests, labels, things that feel solid, and one of the most powerful labels a kid can get, you're smart. That phrase sticks. It gets reinforced by teachers, parents, classmates. It becomes the core of how you see yourself, and for a while it feels amazing. Being smart as a kid gives you praise, attention, a sense of control. Life is on easy mode, and you don't have to study as hard as others. You pick things up quickly, you stand out. But here's the hidden cost. What people are really praising isn't your hard work. It's your effortless success. You were rewarded when you solved problems quickly. When you got an A without trying, when you understood something the first time, and without realizing it, you start to believe, if I'm smart, things should be easy for me. And that belief, it will quietly sabotage everything. Because the moment something isn't easy, when you struggle, when you fail, when you don't understand something right away, it doesn't just feel like a challenge. It feels like a threat to your identity. Wait, if I'm supposed to be smart, then why am I struggling? And instead of leaning into difficulty, you start avoiding it. You don't raise your hand unless you're sure you know the answer. You don't play games unless you know you'll win. You don't try new things because what if you're bad at them? Slowly, your world starts to shrink. You only do what you're already good at. You stick to safe, familiar territory. You protect your image as the smart one instead of actually growing. And that's the trap. Because while everyone else is experimenting, failing, learning, adapting, you're stuck, watching, stalling. And the longer that goes on, the harder it becomes to leave. At some point, you realize you've built your entire identity on something fragile. You can't afford to fail. You can't afford to look stupid. You can't afford to question the thing you've always believed about yourself. So instead, you do nothing. Why smart kids feel so isolated and this is where the loneliness sets in. Because when you stop growing, you also stop connecting. Think about it. Friendships come from shared experiences, struggling through something together, working toward a goal, laughing through the awkward phases. But if you start opting out of those moments, if you remove yourself from the spaces where people bond, you miss out on the connections that make life feel meaningful. You don't join the club because you're afraid you won't be good at it. You don't try the sport because it's unfamiliar. You avoid group projects because they frustrate you. And little by little, you step out of the flow of social life, but you still crave connection. So what do? You lean on what you know, your intelligence. You try to understand people instead of relating to them. You analyze, you observe. You run mental simulations of what they might say or do. And this leads to something called cognitive empathy. It means you can logically understand what someone is feeling, but you don't emotionally connect with them. And it works for a while. You can keep up in conversations. You might even seem charismatic on the surface, but inside, you're exhausted because instead of being with people, you're constantly calculating. What should I say next? How should I respond? What are they thinking about me right now? So now, even socializing becomes something you have to be good at. And to avoid failing at it, you start avoiding it. And that's when the loneliness gets even worse. The final defense. I'm just different. At this point, you're isolated, but you're smart, right? You should be able to figure this out. So you start applying logic to emotional problems. You try to rationalize your self-worth. You write out arguments, convincing yourself that you're fine. You analyze your own behavior to death. And none of it works, because intelligence isn't a tool for fixing emotional pain. It's not a tool for self-worth. It's a tool for solving external problems. And when you try to use it to make yourself feel okay, it just loops over and over, because there's no intellectual answer to the question, am I enough? That question can only be answered emotionally. And for smart kids, emotional growth is often the one thing that got left behind. So when the loneliness becomes unbearable, when the self-doubt becomes too much, the ego steps in and it forms one last defense. I'm just different from other people. I don't relate because they're not as smart. I'm too deep for surface-level friendships. And now, instead of admitting you're lonely, you convince yourself that you're above everyone else, not because you actually believe it, but because it hurts less than admitting you feel left out. And that is the most isolating pattern of all. How to fix it? Step 1. And this is non-negotiable. You have to stop identifying as the smart kid. Not because intelligence is bad, but because basing your self-worth on it, that's toxic. When your value is tied to how easily you succeed, you will do everything in your power to avoid effort, to avoid failure, to avoid anything that might prove you're not exceptional. And that is the very thing keeping you stuck. So if you want to break free, you have to let go of the identity that's been holding you back. Because life isn't about being the smartest, it's about being real. And real people, they struggle, they fail, they grow, and most importantly, they live.